Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the North Lincolnshire series, a district of 56 parishes in the north of Lincolnshire. Let's see which one we're visiting today. Okay, today in North Lincolnshire I've got another small town for you. It's a civil parish with town status, and I know this one has been requested a fair few times. It goes by a three-word name, but quite often the middle word of those three is dropped. We're in Kirton in Lindsey, which is usually known as Kirton Lindsey. This North Lincolnshire episode is sponsored by Past Days, a family history blog by June Terrington. You'll find her link in the description. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Kirton in Lindsey, also abbreviated to Kirton Lindsey, is a market town and civil parish in North Lincolnshire, some 7 miles southeast of Scunthorpe. It's also 6 miles south of the M180 motorway. It's situated half on top and half on the side of a ridge known as the Lincoln Cliff, and at times on this walk around the town, that ridge and its unforgiving slope certainly come into play. The B1398 Lincoln to Scunthorpe Road passes through the town, as does the B1400, which runs down the northern side of the ridge to Messingham as the road to Cleatham. Cleatham, by the way, is a small hamlet to the north, a tiny part of which is within the boundaries of Kirton. We're beginning in an area that's much more modern than the town as a whole. This is generally a maze of narrow, sometimes windy and sometimes footpathless streets, and every single one has something on it of interest. As a civil parish with town status, naturally Kirton is one of the largest in terms of population in the district, with well over 3,000 people. Let's see some more basic information about Kirton Lindsey. The name Kirton Lindsey is an interesting one. Kirton, as we've seen before in places of the same name, literally means church town. However, it's the in Lindsey part that's intriguing. This area was historically part of the West Riding of the Parts of Lindsey. In Kelly's Directory of Lincolnshire, both the 1900 and 1913 versions list the parish as being in West Lindsey. However, West Lindsey's boundaries would change and this area became part of North Lincolnshire in 1996. Kirton's name stands as something of an historical testament to Lincolnshire's old divisions. Kirton has a lot to talk about when it comes to the two world wars. For starters, the cemetery has something unusual. In here lies Lloyd Henry Roper McCarthy. He was a pilot officer of the Royal New Zealand Air Force who died in August 1942, aged 29. He's notable as he doesn't feature on the Roll of Honour in the parish church. I thought these flowers were well worth catching. Kirton's not short of a few floral displays. It's proud of itself, and so it should be. The next couple of areas to explore are a mixture of residential streets with a few landmarks thrown in, such as the church and a school. We pass a bus stop. Public transport here is heavily reliant on buses despite the fact there's a railway station. The number 94 links Kirton to Brigg, whilst the 103 runs to Lincoln. Here's a perfect example of those tight, narrow streets I was talking about. This is looking down Torksey Street, and as you can see, it's one way. It isn't the only one-way street around here either. Just before we go down Torksey Street, I had to get a shot of this amazing old traction engine in this yard. How many of these do you see out and about these days? Torksey Street leads to St Andrew Street, so named because it brings us to the parish church of St Andrew, believed to date from early Norman times. The church was restored in 1860 and it can seat 500 people. It's by no means a small place of worship, this one. Here's the church, looking very proud. Now, such is the nature of how Kirton Lindsey is set out. I'm actually going to be passing this point again later. You can see here it's very tight, narrow streets. I've just come out of here and I'm heading that way, heading for the church, which is literally just there. But then a little bit later, the route will pass this point again on the other side of this. If I turn the camera around, I'll be coming down there and then heading up there. As mentioned back at the cemetery, this is where you can find the Roll of Honour. It's a brass mural tablet that dates from 1920. Kirton also has a cenotaph on the village green, and that's coming later. The church is built on the site of a Saxon place of worship, of which little remains. There's a priest's door in the south wall with a pre-Norman tympanum, which is probably the oldest part of the church. Sir Gilbertine Waterhouse was a knight of Kirton. The effigy within the church is believed to be his, however it's badly damaged, believed to have been by Cromwell's troops during the Civil War. It was mentioned as being intact in 1641, but there's no further record of it until 1862, when it was found buried under the floor of the church during restoration work. St Andrews is known as a united church, its congregation formed by the joining of the Anglican, Baptist and Methodist congregations in Kirton Lindsey. St Andrews House is to the rear. And Kirton has you covered as far as NHS services go too. Whilst there's no hospitals here, there's still a GP surgery, and that can be found where Cornwall Street meets Traingate. So that brings us to the corner of Dunstan Hill, which is where my route does go. It goes up Dunstan Hill, and boy, trust me, it is a hill as well. But first, I've got to go around this little loopy section down here. There's a school down there and a few other bits and bobs. Let's see what's down there, shall we? On the subject of healthcare, in Lowfield Close, the entrance to which is seen opposite, is Lowfield House, a nursing home for people with learning disabilities. Now we're on Grayingham Road, which will follow as far as Barder Way. Keep that name in mind, it'll be important later. A footpath through to Fairfields will take us round in a little loop. I'm going to use these next two shots to mention an infamous piece of Kirton history. That would be the jail, which was known to the locals as Bridewell, which is a slang term for any correctional institution. However, the jail in Kirton was named after one in London. It no longer exists. It was partially demolished and its stone was reused in other buildings in the town. I'll show you where the remaining part of it is later. Kirton has a lot of history with its schools too. A lot of the former school buildings still stand around the town. This is the current primary school, and there's also a secondary, Huntcliffe, up the hill. Aside from one in the marketplace, this is the only other parish notice board I found on the walk around, right outside the school. They never stick very well when it's raining. Luckily though, I managed to wedge it in the corner. So here we are at the foot of Dunstan Hill. It looks deceivingly shallow down here, but trust me, this is steep. One thing that amazes me about Kirton would be how people cope with this hill in centuries past. Just before we go up it, there's Kirton's fire station to see on West Cross Street, which is just off Dunstan Hill. These next two shots are of Dunstan Hill, firstly from the bottom and then from the top. They're not all that interesting, so that gives me a chance to mention a notable former resident. And that would be Catherine Parr, the sixth wife of Henry VIII, who lived at Kirton in Lindsey after her marriage to her first husband, Sir Edward Berg. Now we're at the top and we're on Southcliffe Road, where we find some more flowers. Kirton in Lindsey in Bloom achieved a silver award in 2018's East Midlands in Bloom competition. At the junction with Queen Street is Allwoods Furniture. This gives you a taste of the kind of shops you can find in Kirton. They're not all chain stores. Oh, I'm a little bit out of breath now because Dunstan Hill is deceivingly steep. You look at it and you think, it's not that bad, but it actually is. By the time I got to the top, my hips and my thighs were definitely feeling it. Okay, so we are at the top, and there is St Andrew's Vicarage. Obviously I can't get much of that because it's private. What I can do though is go the opposite direction down Queen Street and take you into the town centre. Well, not quite into the town centre yet in fact, but close. There are a few more streets to explore first, and it's time for a bit of local folklore pertaining to Ash Well. Ash Well was one of the principal sources of water for the town, and it was here. These days, there's a statue. It's said that anyone who drank from Ash Well would then always want to live in Kirton. This building overlooks the site of Ash Well. It used to be a Wesleyan Sunday school for denominations of all children. It was built in 1827. Speaking of religious buildings, this whole area is littered with them, so much so that Kirton has road signs which literally just direct you to this area with the word churches, and there's more yet. Wesley Street is aptly named. These buildings are the former Wesleyan Methodist Church and Hall. The church dates from 1840 and the hall from 1928. This is the area where Wesley Street, March Street and Ray Street all run into one another. Here you're surrounded by buildings that make you wonder if you've stepped back in time. So no word of a lie, when I got to the end of Ray Street just now, I literally said out loud, this is an interesting area. It certainly is. Some very old buildings. Now we're going up March Street, and at 1A is a former shop. This used to be Willis Furnishers. The sign is still displayed on the wall. I wonder what's next for this property. Around the corner again as we trek through the maze of streets, and we're at a Baptist chapel on St Andrew Street. This was built in 1663, rebuilt in 1841 and restored in 1899. This was interesting. This is the old schoolyard. In 1879, a local school board took over the funds for a dissolved grammar school. They would build an infant school here in 1895. We'll see where the old grammar school was later, as it still stands. The board would also build a girls' school to hold 140, and the infant school held 156 at full capacity. We're about to turn onto Queen Street again, this time from the other end. Number 38 Queen Street, known as the Priory, is the remaining part of Kirton Jail. To go with the jail, Kirton had a duchy courthouse, and that was on the green. A handsome brick building, it's where the manorial records were kept. Okay, now we're going into the town centre, up another hill. This is the High Street. So off we go up the High Street, climbing the hill once again, although unlike Dunstan Hill, this is much less steep and it has a handrail if you need it to. There are plenty of independent shops on the High Street. There are some unusual retailers here, including a chocolatier's and a pottery shop. It's not a place that's been overrun by chain stores. That said, it still retains the usual amenities you'd associate with a town, like a chemist, a baker's, a range of general goods stores, and several hairdressers. Now we're in the market square. Kirton's market was held every Saturday. One of Kirton's most popular pubs can be found in the marketplace as well. Built in the 1700s, the George Hotel is a former coaching inn, which provided refreshment and shelter hundreds of years later, and it's still doing the same job. We also have a water pump to see. This has a subterranean passage running by it which leads to the crew yard at the George Hotel. According to the plaque here, very few in Kirton know much about it. To be fair, you could probably make a video just about this town centre. There's plenty of things to talk about and plenty of things to see here, including a couple of information boards. I've just taken a couple of shots of the information board on the side of the pump. And there's also this one here, some tourist information, which tells you about some things in and around Kirton Lindsey. You can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to take some pictures of this. Also in the marketplace is Kirton and Lindsey Town Hall. This is known as the Diamond Jubilee Hall, built as it was in 1897 to commemorate that of Queen Victoria. It was built with stones carried up the hill from Kirton Jail, and one of its doors came from it too. It's not the only building in Kirton that reused the jail's stone. It was renovated in 2010. Here's Kirton Lindsey Fish Bar, which surely must be one of the tallest buildings ever to house a chippy that I've seen. The Lincolnshire Co-op is pretty much a mainstay in towns and villages as large as Kirton is. We'll see plenty more of these all over Lincolnshire. This one doubles as the post office. At the end of the high street where it runs into the B1398, there's a Spar shop as well. Our route turns here and heads now for King Edward Street via South Cliff Road. And where they meet is another pub. This is the Queen's Head, whose frontage is actually on Sylvester Street. Okay, I've gone freehold with the camera now because there's something I need to tell you about at this point here at the Queen's Head. In fact, there's more than one thing. Firstly, we're going to be passing something called the Windmill Plantation in a while. That is basically a housing estate, but it's important because it's to do with a windmill. Speaking of the windmill, it's that way down there. I will be catching that later in the car because I need to go up there anyway to catch the railway station. Something that I won't be catching in either the car or on foot is down here, and that is Kirton Lindsey School, and you will find that today in the picture bit. It's just down there on the right, but my route will not take me down there either in the car or on foot, unfortunately. And also we've got the War Memorial here, and that is what I'm about to talk about right now. Dating from 1920, the War Memorial lists casualties from both World Wars as usual. Interestingly, there's also one name here from the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Right next to this is a board all about RAF Kirton in Lindsey. Stick around until the end of this episode if you want to know a bit more about the airbase, because that's where we're ending. We're now on the Green, which is to the northern side of King Edward Street. My sources told me Kirton hosted a pleasure fair on the Green every July the 18th with a second fair on December the 11th. I couldn't help but notice this satellite dish too. This belongs to a man named Howard Ling, a radio engineer. I've linked his website below. Good luck though understanding all the jargon. Right next to this is the Green School, which was formerly the grammar school. The grammar school was founded way back in 1517. As a national school, this could hold 130 children. And this TV and electronics shop marks the point where the uphill section of Kirton comes to a close. Time to go back down the side of the ridge. Alright, the last leg of the route takes me down Spar Hill to where I began. And there's some interesting street names around here. That one over there is Unicorn Row. As we head down Spar Hill, we pass the Whipping Post. This is one of the smallest listed structures in the country. It dates from the early 18th century and it's believed to have once been in the marketplace. The post was probably moved when the police house was built using stone from Kirton Jail. Whipping, by the way, was abolished as a punishment in 1948. Here's the Windmill Plantation. All the streets down here have windmill related names like Windmill Way, Miller's Close, Millstone Close and Barley Court. Now we pass the end of Church Street and this tree, which for some reason I found quite interesting. Not half as interesting though as the story behind the town's second co-op store on Station Road. This used to be a pub called the First and Last. Originally the existing building was to be converted, but during that conversion part of it collapsed, forcing demolition. This has been here since 2017. And just before we finish the main walk, bonus points are on offer for anyone who knows which country's flag is flying here. As a flag nerd, I knew without looking. Okay, that's been an hour and a half's walk around the town of Kirton in Lindsey. But are we finished? Are we eckers like? I've got at least 3 more things to show you, starting with the railway station. Kirton Lindsey railway station can be found to the north of the town. It was opened in 1849 on the former main line of the Great Grimsby and Sheffield Junction Railway. Originally, the station was built with 2 platforms, with the main station building on the Sheffield-bound side at the top of a long approach road. That building and road still exists. However, the Grimsby-bound platform no longer does. That's because this line is very infrequently used. Weekday services have not called here since October 1993, when British Rail withdrew them. It's just a single track at this point, and in the far distance you can just make out a tunnel heading north. That's where the line runs under the cliff, re-emerging to the north of Hibaldstow. The whole station area is quite interesting as well. It forms part of a much larger industrial estate that straddles both sides of the line. On the opposite side, there's a garden centre. Okay, our next stop is the Windmill, which I mistakenly thought was on the same road as the station earlier, but it's not. It's on a different one. We need to go back down this road, turn left, up Spar Hill, and turn left again, and that's where the windmill is. North of the town, on the ridge next to the B1398, is Mount Pleasant Mill, which is something of a local tourist attraction. It was built in 1875 for miller Edric Lansdell. It used to have 4 sails. It's a 4-storied tarred tower mill with an onion-shaped cap and fantail on top of the remaining roundhouse of a previously erected post mill. It's the only windmill in the area besides Hewitt's Mill at Heapham, which has its original and unrestored equipment and machinery from the 1920s and 1930s. The mill was restored in 1991 and is a commercially working flour mill, making organic flour which is sold to the public. There's also a tea room for visitors, and until the 1920s, Mount Pleasant had a twin. That was in Stockton-on-Tees, but it's now been demolished. From here, there's an exceptional view over the Trent Valley to the west, although you can't really appreciate it very well in this weather. Okay, I've got one more thing to show you here in Kirton in Lindsey, but before I do that, you guys need today's picture bit. So to finish with, we're having a drive around part of the former RAF Kirton in Lindsey. Where we are here is York Road, which together with a couple of residential streets off it is the only publicly accessible area of the former base. Kirton in Lindsey was used during World War I from December 1916 to June 1919. The airfield was used by B Flight of 33 Squadron from nearby Gainsborough until June 1918. During World War II, on a new site, RAF Kirton in Lindsey became active again, opening as a fighter command station. Now remember Barder Way earlier in the video? It's named after ace pilot Douglas Barder, who was a part of 222 Squadron, who arrived here in 1940. He's notable for having lost both his legs in 1931. Still able to fly after retraining, he took part in the Battle of Britain, but was shot down in 1941 and was captured, spending time in a German POW camp. RAF Caister and RAF Hibaldstow were used as Kirton's satellite airfields. It hasn't always been under RAF control. In fact, it's changed hands several times during its existence. It's been used by the US Air Force. It's housed Spitfires of the number 53 Operational Training Unit from Clandow, and even the British Army got involved at one point. That was when the 1st Battalion, Royal Northumberland Fusiliers, arrived in June 1966. They were amalgamated in 1968 into the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, and the camp was then known as St George's Barracks. The RAF resumed control in 2004 when it played host to No. 1 Air Control Centre, a deployable air surveillance and control system which relocated from RAF Bulmer. By 2014, all MOD involvement ceased. The houses were handed back to Annington Homes, who put them on the open market. RAF Kirton in Lindsey has a bit of film history. In May 1954, the takeoff scene for the 1955 Dam Busters film was recorded here. Most of the filming took place at RAF Scampton, however Kirton was used for authenticity's sake, as Scampton at that time had permanent runways, whilst Kirton's were still grass. There is one part of the former RAF base which still sees some aviation. That would be Trent Valley Gliding Club, located in the far southwestern corner of the airfield. I was lucky enough to be invited to the site to have a look around and learn a bit more about RAF Kirton in Lindsey and the Gliding Club in general. Trent Valley Gliding Club is a flying club run by a group of approximately 70 volunteer members based 1 mile south of Kirton in Lindsey. They're a British Gliding Association member club with fully qualified and approved instructors. They have a fleet of club gliders and aircraft that members, those learning, and visitors all fly. Many members have their own gliders, often in a syndicate with another member or two. One thing I was amazed to learn whilst I was here was that you only need to be the age of 14 to fly a glider. Here are some of the gliders up close in one of their hangars. The club fly on Wednesdays, Saturdays, Sundays and public holidays from 9 AM until around 4 PM to 6 PM. Whilst I wasn't able to go up in a glider whilst I was here due to the weather conditions, I was able to have a look at what the skies above Kirton have to offer thanks to their flight simulator. And that's been the parish of Kirton in Lindsey. However, we are not totally done with this area of North Lincolnshire because I was supposed to be going up into the sky in one of these machines to finish this episode off. However, that's not the case because, as you can see, it's quite a grey, murky day, and in the wet you can't fly a glider. So unfortunately that's not going to be happening today, but it is still going to be happening. So keep your eyes peeled for the 5,000 subscriber special, which will be hitting your screen soon, where you will see me in one of those things up in the sky. For now, this has been the parish of Kirton in Lindsey in North Lincolnshire, and I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.